but very few of them make a direct tie to the defendant, Kit Martin. So will all of this add up to a conviction or an acquittal? I'm rejoined this afternoon by former prosecutor, current criminal defense attorney John Hilliard, and our own Court TV legal correspondent, Julia Janae. Julia, if I could start with you, please. And my question is this: in terms of listening in the courtroom, I have found it difficult. I've been confused, and it may be my own confusion, by the evidence presented and keeping it all straight in my head and my mind, and the different forensic evidence and the timeline. Do you think that it has at all sounded confusing to the jury?
I think you would have to be very similar to these jurors in keeping all of that information together. You're a judge. I think it's very hard for this jury who does not follow murders and ballistics and all of the details of a crime scene on a regular basis to keep up with the way that the state presented this case. They moved around a lot. They moved around between their crime scenes. They moved around between their witnesses. You heard from some on one of the murders on one day and the other murders the other day, and then you jump back to all three a different day. And I didn't see a lot of organized note-taking across the board for these jurors. So I really think it's going to be difficult for them to have all of that in order altogether when they get into that deliberation room.
And you just hit the nail on the head. As a judge, and also, though, as a person who trains in trial skills, I am a fan of demonstrative evidence and use of these tools to show the timeline, to show the jury what the evidence is. And you're right, they've jumped all around. John, if I could ask you, as a criminal defense attorney and as a former prosecutor, could there have been an opportunity for the prosecution to use some demonstrative aids to make it all make sense to the jury?
I think you're exactly right, and that was a good point that you made. If there was a timeline, would be very important, and particularly when they come to talking about the cell phone towers and who's right about the cell phone towers and who's wrong about the cell phone towers between the two expert witnesses. Certainly demonstrative evidence on the number of things that were consistent about the shell casing and the bullet fragments. You know, the prosecutor says to the expert, what could you tell us about it? He said there are 5 points of comparison that are exact. And then, are you certain? Well, a lot of times experts can say that, but it doesn't really mean much to a jury, or it could go the other way. I think the most critical thing in this case is who's on the jury and how do they understand the burden of proof and reasonable doubt. This case could go either way. He's certainly the most likely suspect, but that doesn't mean he's the person who did this crime. So that's is it a rope where all these things tie together and twist together and make one strong position, or is it a chain where if you break one link, then the whole thing falls apart? And that's where the jury, that's what they're going to be looking at. And I see this case as going either way, depending on how you look at the responsibility of the jurors.
Right. And I think, too, jury instructions make a big difference. That's what the judge says to the jury. These are the crime. These are the instructions of what you have to take into account. And this is the law that you have to apply to the facts that you've heard as you've heard them. Julia, talk to us about, and I just lost my train of thought because it was a great question. I just remembered it. In opening statements, the prosecution, and you told me about this, did use demonstrative aids because they did lay out the timeline and showed it to the jury and had it available. Do you expect or think that they might also do that in closing arguments, assuming we get to closing arguments at the conclusion of the case by the defense?
I do. And here's what I'm going to be looking for in that PowerPoint of a timeline that they'll be putting up in closing arguments. I hope it doesn't look exactly like the one they used in opening statements, because a key thing they left off of the one in opening statements is they didn't put when the murderous things happened. They did tell you the things they could confirm. They confirmed what time Pamela went to work, what time Cal Phillips couldn't be reached when the washer delivery came to the house, when Christian Martin logged in at work on the Army base, when he logged off, when he set that alarm in the morning. but you don't see a timeline of when they believe he went into the house and committed these murders, when he would have transported these bodies in a car out to a field. It's completely left off of that timeline. So I'm hoping they will add some dates to that timeline to help this jury really get a feel of what unfolded and not ask them to fill in the blanks.
Right. Julia, you make such a great point, and that is that you need them to tell us in the compelling closing argument when the murder happened. I would love to hear a closing argument for you afterwards, because I know your attention to detail and recognizing the importance of that information for a jury before they go out to deliberate. All right, there's another murder case we are following. This is a case out of Tennessee, a very sad case, where a father is accused of killing his 5-year-old son. And right now, that jury is deliberating. We're going to bring you up to speed after a quick break here on Court TV. Welcome back to Court TV Live. So glad to be with you. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. We are closely watching a very disturbing, sad murder case in Tennessee versus the defendant, Joseph Daniels. Daniels is a father who's accused of killing his 5-year-old son. The prosecutors say Joseph Daniels confessed to beating his son to death 3 days after the child was reported missing in 2018. But the defendant, Daniels, claims the confession was coerced and says it was actually his wife who killed their son, Joe Clyde. Our affiliate, WTVF, has more details on this case.
Joe Clyde disappeared from his Dixon County home back in 2018, and as time passes, the evidence grows cold and more theories surface. Joe Clyde's father, Joseph, is charged with homicide, his mother, Crystal, with aggravated neglect. The boy went missing nearly 3 years ago, but his remains have never been found. Obviously, we will not hear from the father, Joseph Daniels, who is on trial for murder, but there were 4 other people in the home that night besides Joe Clyde: the mother, Crystal, an aunt, and 2 sibling boys, ages 3 and 8 at the time.
All right, the jury is still out for deliberation, deliberating the fate of the father, Joseph Daniels. Earlier in this show, we played some of the defense's closing arguments. Let's listen now to some of the state's closing arguments from earlier today.
Joe Clyde, he loved his flannel shirts, he loved his cowboy boots, and he loved to eat apples. You heard from Miss Donnerstag, Joe Clyde was full of life. He loved to have fun, and he liked to go to school and to learn. Miss Donnerstag and other teachers at Centennial were working hard with him, and he was making good progress. But then all that came to an end on a dark, cold, stormy night in April of 2018. Alex walks out, sees the defendant standing over Joe Clyde's lifeless body. He was 8 years old when this happened. And he said, "I didn't tell the truth in the beginning because I was trying to protect him." But that was a lie. He said, "I'm here to tell you the truth now." He saw the defendant pick up the body and carry it outside. We can't tell you where the body is. We don't know if he buried him. He put him in the river. He put him in the pond. He put him in a dumpster somewhere like Love's Truck Stop or some other place. But what we do know is what Alex saw. The defendant concocts this story. Well, Joe Clyde, he must have just wanted to escape in the middle of the night. But he must have pushed the coffee table over, he must have climbed up, he must have found the key, and he must have got the key in the lock, and he must have unlocked the lock. Despite all odds, all these things that no one's ever seen him do before, he learned how to do all those things in the middle of the night and escaped. And based on that statement, one of the largest searches for a person in Middle Tennessee ensued. But on April the 6th of 2018, he begins to come out with the truth of what happened. He beat his son. He threw him on the coffee table. He killed him. He is consistent that he killed Joe Clyde. The place where he put the body changes. He didn't tell where he put the body. The defendant lost his job, quit, and the resignation was accepted and made effective immediately on February the 28th. His wife was going to leave him. My wife can't leave me without Joe Clyde because she needs the $1,200 a month she gets for his disability to be able to make it. And that began what was a downward spiral for Mr. Daniels.
I've been to the hospital several times for something like this. Not for this summer.
How'd you beat him? I threw him on the floor. I spanked him countless times. I threw him on the coffee table. You heard from the statement between Noah and Aunt Joyce. Joe dead, Joe dead, Joe dead, was Noah's statement. Aunt Joyce's reply, yes, baby, Joe dead. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why we're here. Because the night of April the 3rd, 2018, that man killed his son on a cold, dark, stormy night and hid his body. Don't reward him for concealing the body. He killed his son. We ask that you would find him guilty of it.
Such a horrible case. I'm rejoined by former prosecutor, current criminal defense attorney John Hilliard to help break this down. And John, here's my first question, especially as a defense attorney. The facts of this case are so horrible, so horrific, and you have such empathy for the needless, senseless murder of a 5-year-old child. As a defense attorney, how do you even overcome all of those bad facts and convince a jury, at least one juror, that the father wasn't responsible?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think the prosecutor did an excellent job. The thing we just saw, I believe, was a terrific argument, and he made the victim in the case into a person. As a defense lawyer, I go back to the same thing I've said in the other case, and that is you got to have the right jury to have any hope at all. The false confession aspect. Either he did it, or according to him, as I understand it, his wife did it. Either one had the same thing: the motive, the opportunity, the means to commit the crime. And he has confessed to it. There's a difference between a false confession and coerced confession. Coerced confession can be true. It's just that they made him tell the truth. On the other hand, a false confession is, they made me tell something, and I told something that's not true. One of the best things about his situation is that one of the elements of a false confession is that it's inconsistent, and that is that they hadn't been able to find the body. If he was confessing freely and voluntarily and telling the truth, why didn't we get to the part where they found the body? And that's one of the things that I would hit on as a defense lawyer is, that's the potential for the false confession as opposed to coerced.
Oh, John, I really appreciate you breaking down the difference between those two kinds of confessions. Now, the jury has been out, and I think it was around 3 o'clock, which was 2.5 hours ago, that, as I understand it, the jury came back in because the judge found there was a typo in the jury instructions, so he simply clarified that and sent the jury back out. So we know that happened, and now the jury is still deliberating. Do you believe that, I kind of expect a quick verdict in this case personally, but what are your thoughts about that?
If the rest of the case went in the same way that the prosecutor's argument that we just saw went, then I am confident there will be a swift verdict, and I think I know what it's going to be. Again, I go back to the same thing. The prosecutor in this case did an excellent job with the argument, and they have witnesses. Other than the confession, and they have two confessions. So I don't see any way for a defense lawyer to jump over all those things. I agree with you 100% that there's going to be a swift verdict, and I think he's going to be found guilty of the murder.
All right. Thank you, John. And we're certainly going to bring you, if there is a verdict in that case, we'll certainly bring it to you here on Court TV. I want to shift gears now back to the triple murder trial out of Kentucky. Throughout this trial, we've heard from members of the defendant, Christian Kit Martin's family. Up next, you'll hear from his mother, who spoke to Court TV about what a shock the murder charges were.
What time did the defendant go to work? Did he go to work?
Yes.
9 a.m.
And what time did he come home from work?
I don't recall specific times, but typically it would be between 5 and 6, 5 and 5:30, more precisely. I don't remember anything unusual about that day.
Nothing unusual about the 19th?
Except for things going on across the street.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. Happy you were with us. Now, that was Lauren Spencer, the longtime fiance of Christian Martin, testifying earlier this week. She testified along with two of her grown children about how they saw nothing at all unusual on the day of the murders. Now, we've seen several individuals supporting the defendant, Christian Martin, in the courtroom, including his fiance and her two grown children. Martin is charged in the 2015 deaths of Cal Phillips, Pam Phillips, and Edward Donsero. He was arrested just before he was scheduled to fly a commercial jet nearly 4 years after the crimes occurred. There's someone else supporting the defendant, even though she's doing it from a distance. The defendant's mother, Jane Martin. She sat down with Court TV's Julia Janae and wasted no time taking to her son's defense. Despite the fact that she has not spoken to Martin in almost 2 years, she remained firm in her belief that her son was not capable of the crimes charged.
He's a very good person. This came out of the blue. He's not the kind of person who would ever do anything like this. So obviously, the whole family has rallied around, and we just feel we have to do what we can to try and get over this situation. And he has had so many friends all the way. People that don't even know him have been writing and sending letters on his behalf to different government officials because this is just not right.
I understand today was the first time that you've seen him in some time.
I haven't seen him in 2 years. I mean, we have done video chats, but this is the first time I've actually seen him in the flesh.
And I noticed you all were trying to talk, got a deputy who had to say that that's not quite allowed inside the courtroom, but what was that like? What was going through your mind in looking at him?
Difficult. He looks well. He looks very tired. But obviously, after a couple of years of this, he will be tired and exhausted, and I'm sure a little nervous too, because, sometimes these things don't turn out the way they should. And I think we all, we have a lot of faith in the system, but there's always that little niggle in the back of your mind that this might not turn out the way it should.
Can you tell me about your reaction to learning that he had been arrested?
Oh, I can tell you that. That was an awful day in my life. I ended up with a heart condition that day in ICU, which was followed up with surgery. I mean, that was that much of a shock. And it was Mother's Day, I think, that it happened.
It was May 10th, 2019.
It was Mother's Day, 2 years ago. Yeah.
How did you learn? Who told you, and what did they tell you?
Well, he called on the phone, and I said to my husband, it sounded like the woman from the prison who says you have a call. You know how that goes. And then I said, well, that can't be right. He's flying. So I hung up the phone. And then I guess I can't remember what happened after that, except that somebody said, no, he's been arrested. And, my heart just went crazy. I mean, I was rushed from one hospital to another and then to Centennial. And it was very frightening. And that was the reaction when I found out, because it was just so shocking.
Did you have any idea what the details were? Was it something that you'd known about before?
No, not really, no. So that was the way it happened. That was the way we found out.
Tell me about what the next few months were like as you're learning about what the details are, how far back these charges actually stem from.
Let's see. It was ongoing from the court-martial thing, but we thought, that was done, that was over. And that's really all I can say about that, because we just thought that had come to an end, and he could go on with his life again. And then here we come with this, out of the blue.
What can you tell me about the court-martial situation? Were you all involved in helping him fight that?
We were there some of the time, but there wasn't really very much we could do except attend and realize that this was, how can I put it? This was not an accurate account of anything. And we just felt that he was being used by the army for no good reason. It's all blown up out of proportion.
That must be hard to have to say. I know you told me that you all are a military family.
Right, it was extremely hard. And, you know, we were always so proud to be a military family. That was our life, you know. We moved and we did everything that you have to do to be a military family. And then to have them turn on him like this, it was awful. It really was bad.
Still with me, John Hilliard, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. John, I have to ask, during that interview, did you hear anything that you think would compel you as a defense attorney to try to call her to the stand to testify in his defense on Monday?
I didn't hear anything that I feel like would be admissible in the guilt phase of a trial. Certainly, in the event he gets convicted, and she would have the opportunity to speak to the court and to the judge as a fact witness. I don't know that she has anything that she could say of a factual nature, unless there was some kind of character witness opportunity. She certainly could say that. At the same time, that's his mom, and clearly she loves him, and it would not be a situation where I think the jury would put much stock, truthfully, in what she has to say. They would be sympathetic for her, which is good. I don't believe that they would put much stock in what she has to say about truth or falsity.
Right, and I agree with you. As a character witness, if that were allowed, if that were needed. But let me listen. I'd like us to take a listen to a little bit more of that interview when she actually is talking about Joan Harmon, and then I want to circle back to that same question.
Can you talk about his marriage to Joan Harmon?
In plain English, that was the catalyst of the whole thing from day one, was the marriage with her. And of course, they weren't really married anyway, which he didn't know. And we tried to make her feel one of the family, but eventually we began to realize that this was just, it was not right. Things that were said were not right.
Can you characterize any of those? What type of things or incidents would come up during the marriage, maybe even early on?
I don't know, just had an uncomfortable feeling that something wasn't honest with her. That's the best I can say. There were too many stories that didn't jive, and just, no, it was obvious after a while that things were really not right there.
All right, John. So Joan Harmon, we've heard a lot about her in opening statement throughout the case. This is the witness as a reminder for all the viewers, for us, that she does not have to testify. She has claimed the Fifth Amendment right not to testify. The court agreed, will not force her to testify. Knowing that, is there any scenario, John, under which you think that his mother might be called to testify as to what she thinks of Joan Harmon?
Maybe. There's I would, if I were the defense lawyer, I would explore some of the things that she sort of glossed over in her interview, and those are the circumstances where she believed Joan was not truthful, and the things that she said that weren't true. It's an interesting question, because what makes them admissible ordinarily is if Joan had testified, and it would be something to attack her credibility. She didn't testify, but she is also potential other defendant. She's a potential person that could have been of interest in murders. So maybe the court would let her testify. Certainly she could testify that Kit didn't know that his wife was a bigamist until much later in it. So that'll be interesting to see if they try to do that, and to see how well, I guess I guess that the answer to that question has already been answered.
So, yeah, right, we're going to see, though, if the defense, what happens with, I don't anticipate her necessarily testifying, but of course we won't know until next week. So in the last minute, what are your last thoughts about this case, knowing that the prosecution's now rested and the defense begins Monday with its case in chief?
This is a really, really close case, and part of the forensic testimony is curious to me because they have a shell casing. Nobody took any fingerprints off the shell casing. They have bullets, but they don't have bullets from the body. But they don't have ballistics that show that those bullets came out of that gun. So they do have testimony that the round was fired either from a Glock or was fired from a Glock. But there's millions and millions of Glocks out there. So I would be really curious about how the shell casing came up as coming from the gun and how the bullet itself was not able to be identified. That's something that's very curious to me and would create some doubt.
Yep, and I'm gonna stop you there, John, only because we're out of time. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. It's been an absolute honor being with you this evening. My colleague, Michael Ayala, will be up next with a look at all of the day's